Bishop Gaiters, you've become such an important part of Crowdsource the Truth. I know so many people look forward to your shows each week, the different series that you've brought forward, exposing so many of the bizarre things that are going on in our world, secret societies. How are you today, Bishop?
I'm doing great here, Jason, on this 29th day of September 2020. Very interesting times that we're living in, especially of what's going on in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yes, absolutely. It's very interesting what's going on in Louisville, Kentucky. And, you know, Bishop, it's so strange to me. I was just listening to the proceedings in the Michael Flynn case, and so many Black Lives Matter supporters would have us believe that the United States is inherently racist, this systemic racism. And while I don't deny that racism exists, I do reject the notion that our country is inherently racist. I think about the 1960s when restaurants and buses and things discriminated black people from white people. But I was just watching a proceeding where a black man is a federal judge and he has amazing power over a retired general who is a white guy. In 1960, that would never happen. What do you think about that, Bishop?
Jason, we're living in, I would say, the greatest time of deception and manipulation, not just within American jurisprudence, but also within our society, where the deep state has been the masters of both the manipulation of Black pain and the weaponization of Black trauma for the past 430 years. Because this global Baphomet Luciferian deep state, Jason, my friend, has thoroughly studied both our pain and the manipulation of that pain in the full weaponization of our trauma, in which it is through the premise of what we call emotion. And so, you know, most of your liberal cities today, this is where 90 to 95% of all these riotings have taken place, going back the past 60 years, Jason. Not in Republican GOP conservative led cities across the United States, but these liberal democratic cities. But you know, God has raised up, I believe, President Trump to really put a stop to this, and it's going to stop. Absolutely.
Yeah, I share your hopeful outlook there, Bishop. And you know, before we get underway with today's show and the revelations that you're going to bring forward about the pawns in this game, I think it's important that we remind our viewers, Bishop, that they can sponsor your global spiritual revolution by going to PayPal. Oh, sorry, I got the wrong logo there. They can go to paypal.me/GSRR Media Group and make a financial contribution of their choice. We always like to remind people that they should never financially sponsor anybody for an amount that would put them out, but even a small amount of money, when we multiply it over the thousands of viewers that we have each week, it really makes a difference and it helps the bishop keep going. People can also subscribe to the Bishop's YouTube channel. Subscribership is exploding because the Bishop is so popular, but people can get onto YouTube and go to the Global Spiritual Revolution Radio and Media Group YouTube channel. We are simulcasting there right now. And Bishop, you've got a new syndicated radio program coming. Isn't that right?
Yes, that is right, my friend. Beginning this coming Sunday at 5:30 p.m. on Global Spiritual Revolution Radio and Media Group. We have escalated to a whole new level in dimension. We will be a part of the worldwide conglomerate, the Voice of New York, 7:10 a.m. of the WOR 7:10 a.m. family, and along with Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham. So now we are on that level. We have catapulted by that through that level and to that level, and so we thank God for that. And now we have the capacity to reach 200 nations around the world, Jason. Anywhere from 100 to 200 million people around the world. So that's a small amount compared to 7.7 billion people. But beginning this Sunday, at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to be launching internationally through the WOR 710 AM family.
Congratulations, Bishop. That is absolutely huge. But, that is the stratospheric level that you should be in, up there with the Sean Hannitys and the Rush Limbaughs. I can tell, Bishop, that moving forward in the 2020 and 2021 Donald Trump America, I'm very hopeful that we're going to right this ship, and you will be a new champion of conservative voices. I think it's very important that people like yourself, who have been brave enough to stand up in defiance of, the popular, there's a lot of people who are saying really terrible things about conservative black people who want to speak their minds, and it really takes bravery to do what you've done. So I want to thank you, Bishop, and I want to remind our viewers to support what you're doing. Can they still hear you on Life Radio, or is that you're transitioning to WOR?
We're transitioning to WOR, so we will have a link to that, God willing, by this Friday. Absolutely.
And that's where people will listen to you. We've got a big debate coming up tonight, but we want to talk, as you said, about what's gone on in Kentucky. There was an announcement last week by Daniel Cameron, the Attorney General of Kentucky. Also worth mentioning, he is black. So I don't know that he could reasonably be accused of being racist, although reasonable accusations don't seem to be coming into the field so much lately.
Yeah, he's a rising star, I believe, in the Republican Party. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he spoke at the Republican National Convention, if I'm not mistaken. He's a rising star. Yeah, he's a rising star within the Republican Party, and I absolutely love his speech that he gave at the RNC convention. Powerful young man, but he's being put on the spot socially and through the prism of legality. But I believe the truth is going to come out through this teaching today, Jason, that is absolutely going to blow the minds of your listeners in this 3-part series.
I have no doubt that that will happen, Bishop. And I just want to point out the irony that when a young man like Daniel Cameron excels in society and overcomes all the obstacles that anyone would face in studying hard and getting into the schools you need to get into to become first a lawyer and then rising up through that and becoming the Attorney General of a state in the United States of America. I mean, this is a guy who could go on to become the Attorney General of the United States. He could run for president. I find it amazing, Bishop, that when someone who shoots at the police or steals a taser from the police or shoves fentanyl up his rectum and fights with the police, those guys are lionized as heroes. But when someone who has overcome the odds and worked all his life and presents himself as intelligently and cogently and this was an unbiased recounting of the facts as were delivered by the investigation, and then this man is smeared.
He is, Jason, one of the most intelligent men I've ever listened to as far as with the legal system and politics. So he's a rising star. I won't be surprised if he enters into the political realm. Hopefully he can become governor of the great state of Kentucky, or even more at a higher level at the federal level. So this young man is a rising star, and he made the right decision. And I know a lot of black people will not want to listen to that, but given the facts of the Breonna Taylor case and my research, Jason, this is another lie. Again, and I'll prove it here today. It's sad that Breonna Taylor is a casualty of war. And so these are the questions that are going to be answered today concerning PAWNS and, again, the weaponization of black trauma.
Yeah. And with that, Bishop, let's get underway.
Well, Dr. Werner Heisenberg, a great German physicist. He was the educational protege of one Dr. Albert Einstein. And so Dr. Werner Heisenberg, who had designed the matrix mechanics in 1925, along with Dr. Max Born and Dr. Pascal Jordan. So then Dr. Werner Heisenberg, who had developed the psychological quantum physics program that will later be called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Now, somebody may say, what does the Heisenberg uncertainty principle have anything to do with pawns in the game, the manipulation, the weaponization of Black trauma? But the Heisenberg principle simply means, in regards to what's going on now in Louisville, Kentucky, the more accurately we measure the velocity of a particle, the less accurately we can measure its position in space, whereas the particle does not exist at all. And so this is based upon Aristotle's foundational principle, Jason, called first principles of thinking, or better known as the first principles of thinking, which is the basic proposition or preposition or the assumption that cannot be deduced from any other preposition or proposition or assumption, depending upon your social view of that event. So then, which takes us, Jason, concerning pawns in the game, the manipulation, the weaponization of Black trauma, Volume 1. So there is a threefold tier offspring of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And these threefold tier offspring of the Heisenberg principle, through Aristotle's first principles of thinking, is the parallax algorithm, the parallax effect, which has given birth to the parallax view. Now, the term a parallax simply means, Jason, it is the total manipulation of a certain geographical view, depending where the person who is viewing that event has positioned themselves. In other words, this parallax algorithm, parallax effect, which has given birth to a parallax view, where now, Jason, this global Baphomet deep state has studied and mastered the psychology of not just Black America, but the Black diaspora for the past 400 years. So in other words, the more the deep state has measured the velocity of pain and Black trauma, the more deeper that they can manipulate the emotion of a people, Jason, who simply don't know who they are. Now, I'm not talking about all 30 million Black people in the United States and throughout the Black diaspora. But according to parallax algorithm, which gives birth to a parallax effect, which then becomes a parallax view, where the situations, the rioting, beginning in Los Angeles in 1992, Rodney King, then Freddie Gray, then Michael Brown, okay, then Trayvon Martin, okay, then Kendrick Johnson out of Valdosta, Georgia, then Eric Garner here in New York City, including many other riots, because the deep state has thoroughly mastered Black emotion, Black pain, Black suffering, and Black trauma. So then Black America unexpectedly has become pawns in a global mental psyop, Jason, of what we call pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. So then Black trauma is based upon a 430-year projected period of what you and I call global enslavement. Now, you know me, Jason. I am a Black conservative. I don't teach victimhood. But volume one of this series is going to unlayer this political onion that would get to the very core as to the reasons why, Jason, that we constantly are manipulated and weaponized by a system from the left that was never designed for Black liberation. Now, the parallax view then becomes what we call a parallax mapping moment. Well, what is a parallax mapping moment? So the term parallax mapping means the manipulation or the displacement through the American media. We call this Operation Mockingbird. You and I have been talking about that for months now.
Absolutely.
So to wrap our heads around of what's going on today around our country, but more specifically in Louisville, we have to look at the events not through the prism of emotional pain and trauma. We have to look at it from a spiritual paradigm. So the term, Jason, parallax simply means it's an apparent motion of an object against a distant background that is contingent, my friend, according to the perspective shift or shifting of the moment. We also call this chaos theory. Now, chaos theory is a mathematical equation that all chaos is not necessarily disorder, and all order is not necessarily chaos. So there is an order out of what you and I call chaos. So then order out of chaos or chaos out of order is tattooed on the chest of one George Floyd.
Oh, right.
So,
oh, wow. And look at that. Here's the wings, Bishop.
Oh, look at that. Again, Jason, you are blowing my mind in connecting the symbols of the symbology of chaos theory to the tattoo on the chest of George Floyd when we are discussing pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. So then chaos theory, which is a mental psyop system of a liberal system that, according to Malcolm X in 1963, when Malcolm X gave that powerful interview that any one of your powerful listeners can check out on YouTube at the 1963 University of California at Berkeley interview. He said, and I quote, that Malcolm X, who was a Black conservative, and as a quick side note, Malcolm X, whose autobiography is one of the most powerful autobiographies in American literature. But 3 chapters, Jason, was taken out of that book by Alex Haley, who was a member of the Boule Secret Society. So Alex Haley, who was a member of Sigma Pi Phi or Boule, who went on to plagiarize the Roots series, was hired by the FBI along with his friend, a man by the name of Albert Balk, who worked for Reader's Digest as a writer. So, unbeknownst to Malcolm X, and we're talking about pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma, volume 1. 3 chapters, Jason, of Malcolm's book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X, was taken out by Alex Haley. Why? Because Malcolm X was a Black conservative who in 1964 voted for Senator Barry Goldwater of the great state of Arizona.
But didn't Hillary Clinton like Barry Goldwater?
Yes. Well, absolutely. Excellent, Jason. Hillary Clinton was a Barry Goldwater girl, according to her political analysis. What changed concerning Hillary Clinton? We'll probably get into that today or maybe next week in connection to pawns in the game, the manipulation, the weaponization of Black trauma. So 3 political chapters, which Malcolm called his last will political testament. He stated that not only was he a Black conservative and a card-carrying member of the GOP, the Republican Party, but Malcolm X was exposing the origin or the fulcrum of the foundation of the Democratic Party, who not only helped create the Ku Klux Klan through Judah Philip Benjamin, a Rothschild agent in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1865, but the Democratic Party had also created the transatlantic slave trade. And that Malcolm X not only was a Black conservative, his educational mentor, who had died years before, Dr. Marcus Mosiah Garvey, was a Black conservative, along with Malcolm. So why did the deep state, through this house Negro, okay, take out 3 chapters, okay, of the autobiography of Malcolm X, okay? So because the system does not want Black America to know that Malcolm X was a Black conservative, okay? Alex Haley was a house Negro. You see, Black conservatives such as myself, Jason, we are called house Negroes, but we're not the house Negroes. The house Negroes is Reverend Al Vitamin B Deficient Sharpton, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Louis Farrakhan or Khan, all of these Black men, supposedly great Black leaders, they are puppets of a global liberal Baphomet Luciferian system from the left, whose intent is to destroy America by using Black pain and Black trauma against us to bring forth a communistic caliphate. Because the term caliphate not only means the rule of law, but the term caliphate comes from a biblical term, Caiaphas, or the high priest, Caiaphas or Caiaphas, who was an enemy of Jesus Christ, okay? So getting back to parallax viewing, where the algorithm, the view of our sight is manipulated through imaging, Jason. So then, as we're laying foundation concerning pawns in the game, the total manipulation and the total weaponization, excellent picture there, Jason, of Black America through chaos theory, which then gives birth to the manipulation of reality. You and I have been talking about that for some time now. The manipulation of reality, isokinesis, the manipulation of time, chronokinesis, through the manipulation of probable events, Louisville, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Chicago, Sanford, Florida, called psychokinesis, or etc., which those 3 paradigms of manipulation, Jason, gives birth to the manipulation of pressure. Wait a minute, what does that mean, Bishop? So the manipulation of pressure by deciphering and changing the narrative of each case. So this is called atmoskinesis. That's a powerful term, capital ATMOS kinesis. Now, what is atmoskinesis? It is the total manipulation, Jason, of the emotions, the pain and the trauma of a community that bypasses reason through pressure. In other words, here comes Benjamin Crump. Anytime there's the death of a young black man or woman, Benjamin Crump comes on the scene. Why? Because Benjamin Crump is nothing more than a modern day slave of the system, Jason. And again, Benjamin Crump is a boule. Now, you and I have been exposing him for months now, and to your listeners, you can go to the Benjamin Crump Institute website and click down on the link about Benjamin Crump. And I believe around the fourth or fifth paragraph, it talks about, unless they took that out of his website, that Benjamin Crump is a member of Sigma Pi Phi.
Hey, Bishop, look at that. I just clicked on the Benjamin Crump Institute, and it's about us, says error establishing connection. Let's give it another shot. Sometimes the internet has problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Something's wrong.
Now, you and I had exposed it some months ago, and even you showed your powerful listeners that Benjamin Crump is a member of the Michael R. Moore Lodge.
It took it down.
Look at that. See? In Tallahassee, Florida. But Benjamin Crump is a member of the Boule Secret Society. In other words, Benjamin Crump is a modern day upgraded slave that he is sent by his slave masters, George Soros, okay, Bill Gates, okay, Nancy Pelosi, Chucky Schumer. He is sent by the deep state to represent families that they, excuse my French, don't give a damn about. Benjamin Crump doesn't care about the family of Breonna Taylor, whose name is the Palmers. And the Palmers come from the Selden bloodline, which come, Jason, from the Mattingly bloodline out of Ireland. So one of the shooters' last name is Mattingly, Jonathan Mattingly. Oh, Jason, This gets deeper here. When we're talking about pawns in the game, okay, the weaponization of black trauma. So through chaos theory, the deep state has designed the manipulation of pain and the weaponization of trauma to bring disorder to the order of America, okay? So through Atmos Kinesias, the manipulation of public thought through pressure by removing the acuity of reason. And so this is where we get the term problem, reaction, solution that you and I have been talking about for months. Or what is problem, reaction, solution in connection to the Breonna Taylor case. Problem, reaction, solution is where, Jason, the deep state creates a crisis. They create a catastrophe. Whether it's Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Rodney King, who later was found floating on the top of the wall in his swimming pool, floating, found drowned, or the LA riots, the Wisconsin riots, the Minneapolis riots, the Ferguson riots, where the deep state creates a crisis that will solicit a reaction from black people, because Jason, the deep state of the left knows that black America, not all, but a certain percentage, we have never dealt with our historical pain and our historical present day trauma. Why? Because we refuse to admit that we were wrong for joining the Democratic Party. So they create a crisis that will solicit a reaction from Black America, not all, but a certain percentage, which Black America is going to demand a solution in which the deep state, who created the problem, who created the crisis, who created George Floyd, Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, they create these events, Jason, that will solicit a response from us so that we will receive a solution which these devils already had, Jason, before they created the crisis. It's a game. That's problem, reaction, solution.
Bishop, if I may, sorry for a quick second. So while you've been speaking, I've been searching for this mysteriously missing information about our friend, Mr. Crump. And Spanman, who has spent some time as an EMT, mentioned in the comments here that Crump is kind of a slang among EMTs for like your heart stopping or something like that. So that's interesting. When I just Google Benjamin Crump Boulay, it brings up this cached result from the About Us section, specifically about Benjamin Crump's social justice. I mean, this is from the Benjamin Crump Institute, but when I go there and click on the About Us, it's just got an error. And I mean, we could see right here in the cached stuff, it says he is also a member of Sigma Pi Phi Boulay. And you and I have seen that on the website in the past. It's gone now. And it's gone from the archive.
See, Jason, this is what I call a new improved slate. Thank you so much because it validates what you and I have been talking about concerning these Boulay attorneys, beginning with Benjamin Crump. And by the way, the Crump bloodline is connected and was owned by a slave master family that came up out of Ireland, Jason, in 1805, the Mantonley family, who not only owned the Rankins, the Seldons, that became the Parkers, okay, that became the Taylors, but the Mantonley family's bloodline progenitor has produced Jonathan Mantonley, who then is related, Jason, by blood, unbeknownst to him, to Breonna Taylor.
Wow.
I know this sounds crazy. Yes. I know, Jason, I know this sounds crazy. What are you saying? I'm saying, Bishop, that this entire history of conspiracy concerning cops killing black children or black men and women, the deep state knows, Jason, that these people are all interrelated by blood through the transatlantic slave trade.
Whoa.
Why? Because they're using Black America as a pawn. Now, remember that chess term that you and I have been talking about called Juwag, right? It is a German term stating that the best move that one can make is not to make a move at all, okay? And so when we're talking about the manipulation of Black America, which brings us, Jason, it's getting deeper now, to non-reaction solution. What is non-reaction solution? Non-reaction solution in connection to what's going on today in Louisville is when, Jason, you don't need a real problem. You only need to create the perception that there is a real problem. Let me say this again. Non-reaction solution is where the deep state creates a manufactured crisis, but also a manufactured problem that gives the perception that there is a problem in our police departments, which it does not exist. So this is non-reaction solution through the manipulation of perceived reality and perceived control. Now, remember this word, Jason, neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have been talking about that word for weeks now. It's when the human brain becomes the shape of what the individual is thinking and seeing at that moment. We also call this neuroparasitology because of bad dieting, not just with Black people, any person of race, creed, color, or ethnicity. So through neuroplasticity, through bad decision making of becoming poor dieters, it is the parasite that becomes both the character in the thinking of the individual, both through neuroplasticity and through neuroparasitology, which then conceives, Jason, hypercoagulability. Now, what is hypercoagulability or hypercoagulation? It's because of both the plasticity of our thinking and the parasitology of our diet that the bloodstream of our people who don't know who they are. So then the bloodstream becomes coagulated or clotted. This is where we get the term casein, Jason. Casein is nothing but glue. Casein is the main element in Elmer's glue that is one of the main elements in the American milk supply. So, Jason, this is called hypercoagulability or hypercoagulation when the blood becomes clotted. Thereby, it clots our thinking through neuroplasticity and neuroparasitology, which then the human being becomes both, Jason, a thrombotic state and a prothrombotic state of a new slave, Jason. Now, remember these three words you and I have been talking about for weeks in connection to pawns in the game, the manipulation, the weaponization of Black trauma. Abolition A, manumission M, and emancipation E. Now, the American Methodist Episcopal Church, which was created by former boulets, okay? So, starting with a man by the name of Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, long before there was a Boule Seeker Society, helped lay the foundation, Jason, for the AME Church. So it was Frederick Douglass who was a pawn, and I know Black people are going to be upset with me, Jason, but listen, we have to call those things which be not as though they were. So not just Frederick Douglass was a tool of the Rothschilds, but also, Jason, many other Black leaders right after the abolition, right after the destruction of both the Emancipation Proclamation, which became the foundation for the 1865 ratification of the 13th Amendment. So Frederick Douglass, Jason, helped to create the American AME Church, okay, which it was not called AME. That's the official name. But the real psyop of the AME Church, Jason, is Abolition A, African, Manumission M, Methodist, and Emancipation, okay, Episcopal E. So the deep state will create pawns by sending abolitionists to recruit a Harriet Tubman, to recruit people that will save or recruit other Black people, not because the system loves us, but because, Jason, the system wants to educate us through being a redesigned slave. This is where you get the term manumission. capital MANU. So manumission represents an old slave, Jason, that has been redesigned. Okay? So it represents an old slave being redesigned. So through Frederick Douglass and later Richard Allen, these men were tools of Rothschild money to create the American Methodist Episcopal Church, which is code name is called abolition, being sent to a slave to manumission them or to upgrade them, Jason, to be a new modern slave. And once they are upgraded to a new modern slave, Jason, then the system will emancipate you. In other words, Jason, the system will only emancipate you if you have been manumissioned or redesigned and placed on a new plantation. Wow. So then, Jason, in regards to pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma, Black America is being manumissioned because 4 of the most powerful slave plantations today is the National Football League, the National Basketball Association, the National Hockey League, and Major League Baseball. Those are the most powerful plantations in America today. But because of COVID-19, the NFL is going down because there's no fans there. The NBA is going down because there's no fans in the seats. They got cardboard computerized fans. It's a joke. The NHL in Major League Baseball, including the National Hockey League, these are algorithms, or what I call a parallax algorithm, a parallax effect, which gives birth to a parallax view, Jason. The manipulation of an old slave to become a modern day slave.
Bishop, if I may, I want to share a little story with you because I think you know my previous career involved 3D cinematography, and parallax is a really important term. Wow. You know, 3D cinematography, you're using 2 cameras, and the idea is you want to record the viewpoint of a left eye view and a right eye view. And when we look at an item in the left and right eye view, the difference between them is considered on-screen parallax. And Salvador Dali did a series of paintings in 3D. He became fascinated with it because he felt neither the left image nor the right image were the actual canvas, but the effigy in the viewer's brain became the virtual canvas. So I became very fascinated with how this photographic illusion manipulates a person's perception of the image. And it's a good analogy to a lot of the things that you're saying. I was reminded of this because one of the last stereoscopic 3D jobs I did was for the Houston Rockets. Yao Ming was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. And so I was there hanging out at the Houston Rockets, you know, whatever it is, the stadium, their whole facility. And I have to tell you, Bishop, it was one of the most well-funded things I've ever seen. Like the luxuries afforded to these players in the locker room and the lounge area. It was like so over the top. It was unbelievable. And I noticed, I forget the name of the guy who owns it, but he's a tiny little short Jewish guy. And he's hanging out with all these giant, you know, black mostly, basketball players, and I just couldn't help but think along the lines of what you're explaining to us now. This is such a strange dichotomy, but these guys are paid so much money, so they feel like, hey, this is, you know, all cool.
See, Jason, again, you hit another powerful nerve with me because you're talking about this dichotomy then gives birth to a trichotomy of the manipulation of imaging. okay, through emotion, undealt with pain, and unchecked trauma, okay? We call this the parallax view that's built upon the foundation of a parallax algorithm to a parallax, okay, effect, which gives birth to a parallax view through Operation Mockingbird, through the manipulation of Black psychic through the media or the medium. This is where we get the term witchcraft. Excellent point you just made there, Jason, concerning pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. In other words, non-reaction solution. You don't need a real problem. The deep state has created the perception of a problem when a problem does not exist. So it goes through thought, which is taught, Jason, which becomes thinking, which becomes language, dialect, and speech. So the thought of Black America has been manipulated, which has taught us to hate anything that is non-Black, which has shaped the thinking of both our past, present, and future, which has given birth to both a language and a dialect and speech, which is built on manipulation, Jason. Thereby, we become a weaponized tool of our own destruction. Why? Because we are maneuvered on this American chessboard, not by the Republican Party, but by the Democratic Party that through Lyndon Baines Johnson, after the 1964-65 Civil Rights Act, he said, I will keep these NIGGERs in the Democratic Party for 200 years. Jason, it's working. So now we have to first deconstruct both the manipulation of our pain in order to deconstruct the weaponization of our trauma. It's deconstruction, instruction in order to reconstruct who we are as Americans in regard to Black pain, Black trauma, and Black emotion. Jason, it gets deeper here. So then, Pawns in the Game, Volume 1, we are just laying foundation today, Jason, concerning the history, the origins of both the manipulation of Black pain and the political weaponization of that trauma. Now, going back to 1441, now I'm not teaching victimhood. You know me, Jason. I am a Black conservative. I don't teach victimhood. But what has happened to the American Black psyche? We have developed what I call a historical Stockholm syndrome, where we have grown attached and have fallen in love with our slave masters in the Democratic Party and the abuse from that party for the past 200 years. So in 1441, Jason, when the global transatlantic slave trade began for a protracted period of 430 to 460 years, from 430 to 460 years, the global deep state diaspora through the global slave trade, which was never designed by the Republican Party, but was designed by Rothschild, Oppenheimer, Warburg, Pritzker money, which that family is in Chicago today, who built the slave ships, Jason, and had paid off many of the this Ghanaian tribe called the Ashanti tribe. Now, remember when Nancy Pelosi, about a month or two ago, and along with the other Democrats, had went down on one knee in the Capitol Rotunda wearing kente cloths. Now, Jason, as a quick side note, when we're talking about pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma, during the transatlantic slave trade, excellent picture there, Jason, the Ashanti tribal leaders were paid off by the Portuguese in 1441 and later by the British deep state and later by the American deep state to sell their people into slavery. By paying, they received monies over a protracted period of 400 years. I'm talking about the Ashanti tribe who had created the kente cloth that you're now seeing in this picture.
Bishop, when you Google it, it brings up, I'm sorry to interrupt, but historical drawings of the slave trade and Nancy Pelosi.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, here's a photo.
Yes. And it's oh my God, look at that.
How could they have a photo, though? It was 14-something. I mean, this must be late 18.
And that's probably later, probably in the 1800s. But there was a ritual that the Ghanaian Ashanti tribe performed when they sold their people, black men, women, and babies, into slavery. When those slaves went through the Middle Passage, Jason, which was the location of a tunnel where those slaves, where the Africans were sent forever into Western society, the Ashanti tribal leaders would kneel down on one knee wearing kente cloths and praying to their gods, thanking their gods for selling their people out. Now, the Democratic Party has done the same thing, led by a Jezebelic witch by the name of Nancy Pelosi, whose father was a part of the Baltimore Italian Mafia. I'm not talking about Italian people. I'm talking about the father of Nancy Pelosi. That's a ritual, Jason, where they are telling Black America now, we are selling you to the Baphomet Luciferian system on a global scale because we're sending you through the present day political Middle Passage. So the Middle Passage is the Democratic Party. Oh, Jason, these are the slave masters who have designed a new slave, Jason, called the American Black American, the American human being, where they have designed, not just Black people, anyone that will be redesigned or manumissioned by an abolitionist so that the old slave can be rebuilt into a modern day slave, LeBron James, Stephen Curry, who loves to talk to Dr. Little Tony Midget Fauci. Why? Because these Black millionaires are pawns, Jason, in a global demonic game. Now, it came, Jason, recently, according to the UK Guardian. Now, they might have taken down this link, Jason, but Cambridge Analytical. Now, remember, it was the Trump campaign who had hired Cambridge Analytical, and which is ran by British MI6, which is the British equivalent of the American CIA. So Cambridge Analytical is a computer corporation who specializes in analyzing the psychic of the voter. Now, Alicia Garza, Opal Tometi, and Patrice Cullors have hired Cambridge Analytical to develop a software program for Black Lives Matter to recruit men and women, regardless of race, creed, or color, where those people are not educated and thereby can be easily manipulated. Okay? This is pawns in the game, the total weaponization of Black trauma. So there's a theory, Jason, called the Gestalt Theory. Okay? Now, you and I have been talking about that for months. So the Gestalt Theory, in relation to pawns in the game, in the total weaponization of Black trauma, the Gestalt Theory began as the Gestalt principle, which was designed by doctors Max Wertheimer, Wolfgang Kohler, and Fritz Perls, who were Khazarian devils. I'm not talking about Jewish people. I'm talking about those who say they are true Jews, like yourself, but they're not Jews, Jason. So Dr. Max Wertheimer, Wolfgang Kohler, Fritz Perl, and Dr. Kurtz Kafka had developed the Gestalt principle, which means the total manipulation and altering of human emotion, pain, trauma through imaging. Crack News Network with Don Sweet Tea Lemon and Christopher Fredo Cuomo, or through MSNBC with Rachel Maddow, they're using the media to perpetuate an image, Jason, that the police force is evil, and they're not. Yes, there's some bad apples, but 98% of the American police force are great men, women of God who are great patriots, Jason. But later, there was a Nazi psychologist, is getting deeper now, by the name of Dr. Kurt Lewin, Kurt with the K, who then created the Gestalt psychology, where he built upon Dr. Max Wertheimer's Gestalt Theory, which has now become the Gestalt psychology program of a former Nazi clinical psychologist, who then moves to the state of California to create Stanford University's Parapsychology Research Center, okay, which is now led by Dr. Bruce McCandless, who is a confidant of the late Kobe Bryant, okay, because Kobe Bryant, along with Jeffrey Morgan Steibel, had contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to Stanford University's Parapsychology Research Institute, where they master the ability, Jason, through Gestalt psychology and theory, the total manipulation of human behavior through thought. So then, now we're seeing Gestalt theory and psychology in Louisville, Kentucky, where human behavior, Jason, is then manipulated by the deep state through the media that creates, get this, the illusion of a character that does not fit the human psychology. In other words, that's called parapsychology, scientific research, which is a common name for witchcraft or manipulation. So it gets back to, Jason, pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. So through parallax mapping that comes from the parallax algorithm of a people's thinking, the parallax algorithm, the parallax effect, which gives birth to the parallax view of imaging, which is now called a parallax mapping, where it represents the total displacement of reason, which takes us to 1991, Jason. Oh, man. So then this gets deeper as we are just laying foundation, and we got around 27 minutes left concerning volume 1 of Pawns in the Game. Okay? Now, the pawns think that they are kings and queens. That's called the manipulation of perceived reality. So in 1991, Jason, during the month of March, on the 3rd of March, 1991, in Los Angeles, a young African-American man is stopped by 4 cops of the California Highway Patrol, okay? So now Rodney King becomes the first pawn in the modern day psychic ability of the deep state to create rioting and unrest to further not the goals of Black America, but to further the goal of the hidden demonic elite who are pulling the strings behind the scenes. So Rodney King is stopped for speeding on Highway 210. Now, Jason, when we examine what happened to Rodney King, now there was a man who had videotaped Rodney King. Now, Jason, this is going to blow your mind when we're talking about pawns in the game, okay? The total manipulation of Black pain and Black suffering, okay? So when we're talking about manipulation of Black pain and suffering, we have to start with Rodney King. I'm not saying Rodney King was a prince or an angel, but the person who had videotaped Rodney King was paid off, Jason, by the city of Los Angeles to alter the video.
What?
Yes, they were paid. Listen, the guy that took, let me say this again. The guy who videotaped Jason, the Rodney King beating, was paid off in the manner of $250,000.
What?
By the LAPD through the city of Los Angeles to alter the video.
How?
Not to protect the cops, but to implement the cops. Oh, Jason. Again, listen. Now, were the cops wrong for yes, they were wrong. But what I'm saying, Jason, this video guy, this cameraman, was later paid off to alter the video coverage of the actual beating of Rodney King that took place on the 3rd of March in 1991.
But Bishop, how could he alter it? It's just a guy with a VHS camera.
Well, see, what happened, the LAPD, along with the city of Los Angeles and the governor of California, had got a hold of the guy that did the videotaping, okay? And the guy that did the actual videotaping then was paid, Jason, okay? And that camera later was auctioned online by a man by the name of Nate D. Sanders, okay? Through the Nate D. Sanders auctions out of California. So this man who videotaped the beating was paid $250,000 to help alter the video coverage of the beating, not to implicate Rodney King, but to implicate the cops. Jason, listen, and the last name of the guy that did the videotaping is Holiday. Okay,
that's interesting, isn't it?
Again, Jason, again, I'm telling you are one of the best hosts that I've ever been in contact with because you're helping me go to the next level. So, Mr. Holiday, whose first name is not given out,
no, it's George. It said in that article, Pais.
Yes. So the video was doctored to make it look like that the police wanted to beat this man to death, but in actuality, it was Rodney King who initiated the beating. Jason, this is called Gestalt Theory.
But I mean, they really beat the crap out of him. It was so excessive.
It was, and they were wrong. It's no, and they should have been. I know that they were. They got off, and I think there was a civil rights case, and of course they should have been sent to prison for life. I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have is the weaponization of the event that made it look like that Rodney King did not initiate, the beating, but it was
one of the things. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm so taken by this because this thing, this Nate Sanders auction, they just did it like a month ago, July 30th, 2020, amid all this George Floyd. Like, why is he suddenly selling this video camera for $225? I mean, this is like I was wrong. It's not VHS. It's like a Sony Mini 8 or whatever the format was at the time. Yes. But why is he selling it now? And also, it looks amazingly well preserved for a 30-year-old video camera.
This is a wag the tail situation. Why is it not just coming out during the time of the Breonna Taylor case? Jason, this is perfect, the perfect synchronizing of events through a pattern of manipulation through weaponizing imaging. So, wait a minute, you pay a guy $250,000 so that he can allow the city of Los Angeles, ran by Democrats at that time and still are, to manipulate and alter the video. In other words, they did not want America to see Rodney King initiating the beating. Yes, the cops were wrong. They should have been sent away for life. I don't have a problem with it. Jason, this gets back to the Gestalt Theory through Gestalt psychology by parallax viewing the minds of Americans, through the displacement of reason through lies, So these four officers, Stacy Kuhn, Theodore Brincino, Timothy Wynn, and Lawrence Powell, Now, it's interesting, Jason, and this is a 3-part series, and we're not going to get all of it done today, but I'm dealing with the Rodney King case because Rodney King was nothing but a pawn in the hands of the left that would perpetuate and give birth to one of the greatest riots in American history. Excuse the sirens there. So then, during this case, Jason, a judge, and this gets crazy, a judge by the name of Stanley Weisberg, capital W-E-I-E-E-R, was at one time a part of the prosecuting attorney's office for the city and county of Los Angeles, who had worked with a blood relative of his, a woman by the name of Leslie Abramson, who had represented the Menendez brothers.
Oh, and she put them in those cute sweaters and everything?
Yes, because, Jason, according to the writer, that's right, Dr. Robert A. Rockaway, concerning the history of Jews in America, he doesn't make mention of Judge Stanley Weisberg. Excellent picture there, Jason. Or
crazy
Leslie
hair,
Abramson.
This lady.
Yes, the Weisbergs, whose name was called the Wiesenthals, was changed to Weisbergs in the mid-1800s, which that bloodline married into the Abram family, which become the Abramson bloodline. In other words, Jason, Judge Stanley Weisberg is related by blood to Leslie Abramson, not because of a black writer, of a Jewish writer, Dr. Robert A. Rockaway. This thing is a scam, Jason. When we're talking about pawns in the game, the total weaponization of black trauma.
Bishop, quickly, I don't know if people remember these Menendez brothers, but it's one of the most disturbing criminal cases.
Yes.
I mean, these two guys shot their parents with shotguns, and the mother didn't die, so they went and got more shotgun shells and came back and shot her more. Two of the sickest, most disturbed individuals I've ever become aware of. And this woman put them in these sweaters and was like patting their hair to make them seem like young boys. They're psychotic.
They're psychotic. And so Leslie Abramson, and I'm not against her for representing these young men. That's the court of law. They have a right to legal representation. But I'm just peeling back the onion layers of history that Judge Stanley Weisberg, who moved the Rodney King case from Los Angeles to Simi Valley, is related by blood to Leslie Abramson. I'm not saying that's evil, Jason. I'm just saying they're all related and are connected in cahoots with each other. So the Menendez brothers are pawns. Yes, they should get the death penalty. Have no problem with that, okay? Including Rodney King and Eric Garner and Freddie Gray and Trayvon Martin and Breonna Taylor. They are pawns, Jason, on this global chessboard called the global deep state Luciferian Baphomet system. Now, according to Dr. Nir Gabler, his book, An Empire of Their Own, How the Jews Invented Hollywood. He's Jewish. He had said that Leslie Abramson and Stanley Weisberg, are not only related by blood and they're being exposed by a Jew, but they had worked together regarding both the Menendez case and moving the Rodney King case from Los Angeles to Simi Valley in order to elicit a response from Black Los Angeles to destroy their neighborhoods, which through gentrification, which is a modern day term going back to the 1920s, housing covenants of racial discrimination against Black Americans of buying property. So what the deep state wanted, they couldn't go in and just tear down people's houses, but they had to create the illusion, Jason, that there was a problem. And don't get me wrong, the LAPD needed to be cleaned up. I have no problem with that. But Jason, Rodney King was a pawn that created one of the worst riots in American history in connection to pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma. So then, Jason, a month before the riots, now remember this witch, Louise Huebner. Now, it's interesting, Jason, as we're about ready to close this out today, concerning Volume 1, Pawns in the Game, the total manipulation and weaponization of Black trauma. So a month before the riot, this witch, Louise Huebner, had taken a group of Black witches from Baltimore. And this Louise Huebner in 1968, Jason, was given a certificate by the County of Los Angeles, which you can look up, and I believe that you had showed that on Google Images some weeks ago. Yeah. This embossed certificate with the seal of the County of Los Angeles, which the political leaders of the left ordained her to be the witch of Hollywood. And so, Jason, Louise Huebner, with these Black witches from Baltimore, a month before the riots, had went to the corner of Normandy and Florence to put curses on that corner. Wait a minute. Normandy and Florence, Jason, was the epicenter of the Los Angeles riots. There you go. So then, Jason, 27 years prior, in August of 65, a month before the riots, this witch had also cursed, and by putting multiple curses on the community of Watts, which began, Jason, the psyop of the Watts riots. So what I'm saying, every riot in American history begins not through a geopolitical lens. It begins through the foundation of a spiritual paradigm, and then creating pawns in the game, the total weaponization of Black trauma. And so, Jason, as we move forward here, so then what the U.S. government wanted to do was to destroy the homes of South Central, Compton, and Watts to create high-rise buildings by jacking up the prices. But legally, Jason, they could not go into South Central, Compton, and Watts, so they created a crisis. Here it comes, Rodney King, to solicit an emotional response from Black people whose emotions, pain, and trauma was manipulated by the puppet masters in the U.S. government, especially on the left, and through the demonic president of George H.W. Bush. So the government wanted to gentrificate South Central, Compton, and Watts by revising the old housing covenants of the 1920s to drive out Black people from their homes in order to create a new breed of citizens. Jason, this is so wicked, as we are bringing to an end today of Volume 1 of Pawns in the Game, the weaponization of Black trauma. Now, question is, how did this begin? Well, going back, and now remember, Jason, some months ago, and we got about, 10 minutes left. Now, remember some months ago, Jason, you and I had talked about identity politics, right?
So what kind of identity? Had talked about,
identity politics in connection to the New York Cotton Exchange, right? And the New York Stock Exchange. So the New York Cotton Exchange today is called the New York Stock Exchange, which began its inception in 1817, where, Jason, a group of deep staters led by August Belmont Schurenberg, who was a slave owner here in the state of New York, who then never whipped his slaves, but he burned his slaves at the stake. That's why the horse race that's named after him is called the Belmont Stakes. So then, August Belmont Schurenberg, the father of the Belmont Stakes, was the head of the New York State chapter of the Democratic Party. So then, the stock exchange had sold not Coca-Cola or Pepsi or IBM or Frito-Lay. The stock was the indigenous African who then was sold as a stock, a commodity lining the street, which is now called Wall Street. It's called Wall Street, Jason, because the slaves that were imported out of Alkebulan, that we call Africa today, was sent along the East River out of not just West Africa, but many slaves that were already slaves in Western Europe, working under the British Crown, came on those ships to help create, through Scottish York Rite money, New York. So it's called Wall Street because they lined up Black men, women, and babies along the East River, going down to the East River, and were sold on an auction as a draft. So when we talk about the NFL draft, the NBA draft, the National Hockey League draft, in Major League Baseball draft. That term draft came from the origin of slaves being sold on auction blocks throughout Wall Street, which 20,000 of those slaves, Jason, are now buried beneath the ground of Wall Street, buried not by the Republican Party, but buried by the Rothschilds, including the Schoenberg family of the left, Jason. So the stock today is called LeBron James. The stock today is called Stephen Curry. The stock today, Jason, okay, is called Tom Brady. It doesn't matter what color the stock is or the commodity, as long as that slave is designed as a new manumission slave. So you cannot be emancipated unless you allow the system to redesign you or manumission you as a slave. So Jason, in going back to the 1800s, the cotton exchange becomes the stock exchange, and many of these major corporations and insurance companies like Aetna, okay, and all of these major American outlets, which many of these basketball players, football players, promote through commercials, those corporations had their hand, Jason, in the transatlantic slave trade. The Aetna Corporation, right? Time Life or New York Life Insurance, okay? And many of those slaves helped build the New York Times newspaper conglomerate. That came from the back of slaves. Now, Jason, I'm not teaching victimhood. What I'm saying is that the condition of the mental psyop of Black Americans is connected to their pain and their trauma, Jason, through the global Atlantic slave trade. That in my conclusion, Jason, we're going to pick back up beginning with Breonna Taylor next week. But Jason, I'm going to reveal something to you that's going to absolutely blow your minds here. So there was a pastor, a well-known African-American pastor by the name of Pastor Stephen Garvey, okay? Stephen Darby. Pastor Stephen Darby, capital D-A-R-B-Y. He had pastored the Destin Church, right? The Destin Ministries Church. So a few years ago, he had mysteriously died. Now, one of his members was the mother of Breonna Taylor, and the family of Breonna Taylor were members of his church. So Stephen Darby was exposing the Boule chapter in Louisville, including exposing Black corruption with Black political leaders, not just in Louisville and in Lexington and at the state capitol. So all of a sudden, he ends up dying under mysterious circumstances a few years ago. Breonna Taylor, her pastor, was Dr. Stephen Darby. Now, Jason, on that note, we will put a bow ribbon on that, and we will come back to next week, and it's going to blow your mind as to the Breonna Taylor case of how America is being played again. Now, Jason, as a side note, listen, before we close out today, the 3 cops, Jason, that were involved in the shooting of this young woman, Jonathan Mantonley, Brett Haskinson, and Miles Cosgrove, supposedly shot 32 bullets, Jason.
I'm surprised not 33, Bishop.
But they're saying 33? Oh, my God. So they're saying 33.
No, I'm saying I'm surprised it wasn't 33.
Yeah, and would not be something that it came out to be that number 33. Nothing is by accident, but 32 shots. But Brett Haskinson and Miles Cosgrove, who did most of the shooting, got off. But Jonathan Manley was fired by the Louisville Police Department. But that's not the problem, Jason. That's part of the problem. They had been surveilling the home of Breonna Taylor. Now, I'm going to say this, black people are going to get upset. There is no way, Jason, that Breonna Taylor did not know that her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker III, was not a drug dealer.
Was not?
Kenneth Walker III, who was in the apartment, who was Breonna Taylor's boyfriend at the time. And there was another, his drug partner, Jason, a young man by the name of Jamarcus Glover, capital Glover, was the ex of Breonna Taylor, and her boyfriend at the time of her death was a major drug dealer in Louisville.
Right.
Whose father had said that his son was hired by the post office. But Jason, according to my research and contacts of pastors I know in Louisville, this young man, there's no record of a Kenneth Walker III being hired by the Postal Service in and around Louisville, Kentucky. So Kenneth Walker, Jamarcus Glover, and Adrian Walker funneled drugs through the house, through the apartment of Breonna Taylor. And that house is not just called a crack house, it's called a trap house.
Yeah.
So the woman of the house is called the Trap Queen.
Fetty Wap.
I'm not blaming, Breonna Taylor. So I'm not blaming her, but I'm saying, Jason, notice, the trap star or the trap queen is always the woman that will host drug dealers to funnel drugs through her home, in which the Louisville Police Department had her under surveillance for a year. I'm not saying that she was a drug dealer, but it's an impossibility, Jason, okay, that she did not know that her home was a trap house that was the epicenter of a major drug center. The police officers, Jason, knocked 3 times and announced themselves 3 times. Kenneth Walker, he said he shot a warning shot. Jason, I'm going to say something. Listen, we're going to sign off here today because I got to go to another radio show, okay, out of London, England. So in the next 45 minutes. But listen, I believe that Kenneth Walker, Jamarcus Glover, Agent Walker knew the narcotics task force cops that entered that apartment. Just like Freddie Gray was taken out not because he was black. Freddie Gray was a major drug dealer that represented the entire apparatus of the Baltimore Police Department, that they owed him drug money and they took him out because of that, just like George Floyd with Derek Chauvin. Now, I'm not disparaging, Jason, the life nor the memory of this young woman. But Jason, she was a casualty of war. Her parents, her mother received a $12 million payout, stating in the agreement that she would not prosecute the Louisville Police Department. So why are they, Jason, we're being lied to again and again. But Jason, I'm coming back next week to give you something that's going to blow your mind about this case. I'm going to build up to the Breonna Taylor case, finishing up with Rodney King, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, okay, Freddie Gray. Now, in my conclusion, Jason, the 3 cops supposedly shot 32 bullets. Now, this Jonathan Mattingly, who shot 6 shots, Breonna Taylor was shot 6 times. But Jason, she was in the back room. Wait a minute, I'm confused. Now, we're talking about Gestalt Theory. Now, remember at the beginning of today's lecture, we talked about the Heisenberg principle of uncertainty. How can this woman be shot 6 times, but the cops came in the front door? Listen, either those cops shot her through the window, which I don't believe, or somebody in that apartment shot her, that she was dead already before the 3 cops came into the apartment. She was in the back, Jason. And the young man, this Kenneth Walker, had lied to the cops. He said that he did not hear the cops knock on the door. And there's multiple black witnesses in the area that said not only was the cops there, but they heard the cops say, not once, not twice, 3 times, open up because we have a search warrant. It was not a non-knocking search warrant. It was a search warrant where they knocked on the door 3 times, and Kenneth Walker was shooting at them. Not a warning shot. Why? Because Kenneth Walker knew that the police were after him because he had worked for them, Jason.
He worked for the police. You know, Bishop, the comment has gone away, but someone in the comments brought up the excellent point that 32 bullets fired by the police plus 1 bullet fired by Kenneth Walker is 33 bullets.
Ooh. Say that one more time. Oh my God. I got
it. All the official stories are saying, yes, the police fired 32 bullets, but Kenneth Walker fired this 1 shot that initiated all of it, making the total number of bullets fired 33.
Oh my God.
Bishop, her address is 3003 whatever street. I found that very strange.
Wow, Jason, she was targeted. Now, I'm going to say this, and black people are going to get upset. There is no way, no how that she did not know that she was a part of a drug ring. Now, notice this, Jason, before we close this out. 32 shots, the 33rd with Kenneth Walker III. So they're saying 32 shots from the cops, okay? So they're saying Cosgrove shot 16 shots. So they're saying Mattingly shot 6. Cosgrove shot 16 shots. Jason, that leaves 6 shots. Okay, let's do the math here. So you got 6 shots through Jonathan Mattingly's gun, 16 shots through Officer Cosgrove, who got off. That's 22 shots. And the other 10 shots came from Officer Hanskinson. Wait a minute now. So 6 shots from Mattingly, 16 through Cosgrove, and the remaining 10 shots, supposedly, Jason, came through Officer Miles Cosgrove. 6 from Officer Jonathan Mattingly, 16 from Officer Brett Hankinson, and the remaining 10 shots from Miles Cosgrove. But it was Jonathan Mattingly who is indicted under a Walton conspiracy law. Jason, something's not right. So, wait a minute now. How did Breonna Taylor get shot if she's in the back room? Because the cops didn't come from the back. Jason, we're being lied to, okay? Someone in that apartment shot that girl as a pretext to begin this problem reaction solution by creating a crisis that would destabilize Louisville, because they're trying to make the Attorney General, who's a rising star in the Republican Party, look so bad politically. So wait a minute now. They got 32 shots, Jason. But two of the cops, Cosgrove and Henniskin, were outside. Wait a minute now. So you telling me that between them, they had 22 shots. They were firing in the apartment, outside of the apartment? I don't believe it, Jason. Jason, I don't believe it. And they're saying that Breonna Taylor was shot 6 times, but she was in the back of the apartment, in a room. Jason, the numbers don't add up. Like the magic bullet theory, making those Jason, we got 32 shots. The 33rd one with Kenneth Walker III. What did Kenneth Walker do to Breonna Taylor? Jason, because it doesn't make sense. 6 shots through Officer Manley, okay? 16 shots outside of the building from Officer Cosgrove, and 10 remaining shots from Officer, Cosgrove. So wait a minute. So you got Brett Haskinson, 10 shots, and you got 16 shots, Jason, outside of the apartment building by and through Officer Miles Cosgrove. That's a lie, Jason. They're telling you and I that there was, out of the 32 shots from the cops, supposedly, 26 came outside of the apartment building where they were just shooting.
And those guys have been charged with reckless endangerment because they're just blindly shooting into a building. They have no idea if there's people or children or whoever might be in there. It's not very normal behavior for a police officer to just shoot into a building. But Bishop, I found the address, and I can't recall if it was you or another co-host who had shared this with me, but Breonna Taylor's apartment is at 3003 Springfield Drive. Was it you, Bishop, who was telling me that Springfield has some significance?
Springfield, Minnesota is the hometown where Antifa was created. So Springfield, Minnesota is the headquarters where Antifa was created along with Toronto, Canada. But it started in Springfield, Minnesota. Man, Jason, you got a great mind. You don't forget nothing. So, my God, so Springfield, we talk about Springfield, Minnesota, the birthplace of Antifa, but a young man made his presidential bid by the name of Barack Hussein Obama in Springfield, Illinois.
Right. Springfield.
It's Springfield, absolutely. And
the Simpsons always talk about Springfield.
Always talk about Springfield. And you know what, Jason, what's so crazy about this Breonna Taylor case? Again, these 33 shots, and big time shout out to your listeners for noticing the 33rd shot. So 6 shots by Jonathan Manley, but the remaining, Jason, 26 shots by Officer Brett Hankinson and Officer Miles Cosgrove outside. Jason, I don't believe it, because the neighbor said that the cops were not shooting from outside. They were inside because they had to protect themselves. This drug dealer, whom his father said got a job with the Postal Service, and there's no record of the Louisville Postal Service Division interviewing a Kenneth Walker III or even providing and offering him a job. Jason, we're being live. Here comes Benjamin Crump with his fist. Jason, I am so sick and tired of this, Jason.
Yeah.
I'm tired. See, we as Black conservatives, we're trying to tell Black America, why do you constantly get food and manipulate it by these boule Negroes, I can say that, okay, who are used by the deep state, not because they love you, Breonna Taylor, and your family, God rest her soul. But Breonna Taylor, there's no way, as smart as she was, that she did not know that Kenneth Walker III, her boyfriend, and Jamarcus Glover, her ex-boyfriend, and Adrian Walker, who was another ex-boyfriend, two ex-boyfriends, and a current boyfriend, funneled drugs through her apartment.
Yeah.
Now, if the cops were wrong, they should go to prison. I don't have a problem with that, Jason, just like the cops out of Simi Valley who got off. My problem is, Jason, is concerning pawns in the game. The manipulation, the weaponization of Black trauma. And we burned down our own buildings, and 90% of those Black folk in Louisville didn't even know Miss Taylor and wouldn't care. Because just like in that powerful flyer, Jason, these are pawns. George Floyd, a pawn. Trayvon Martin, a pawn. Okay? Freddie Gray, a pawn. Breonna Taylor, a pawn. Rodney King, a pawn. Eric Garner, pawn. They're pawns, Jason, which when it's time for them to be checkmate, then it will usher and unleash a reaction from a people who don't know who they are. They know what they are, but they don't know who they are. But we're going to get to the truth on next week, and it's coming down because Daniel Cameron, that Attorney General for the state of Kentucky, he's a patriot. Yeah. But he knows the lies that's being perpetuated by Black leaders in Louisville. And Breonna Taylor's pastor, listen, her former pastor. Now, I don't know, Jason, I want to make this clear. I don't know if Breonna Taylor's mother, okay, or the family belongs to Destin Ministries Church, but the family used to sit under Dr. Stephen Darby, who mysteriously died 3 years ago, Jason, for reasons we don't know.
Really?
And that is the end of Volume 1 of Pawns in the Game, the weaponization of Black trauma. And I thank you, my friend. Mind-blowing information that your powerful listeners received today.
Yeah, really excellent, Bishop. And, just very quickly, when you were speaking about pawns and you had brought up Daniel Cameron, in a way, we're sort of all pawns in this game because here we're presented with a guy who's talking about facts and evidence discovered in an investigation, and he just spoke about it very plainly. He wasn't emotional. He just evaluated the facts, and yet he is villainized, and people who are selling drugs and shooting at the cops are treated like heroes. This guy should be the hero. Also, one other thing I just wanted to point out quickly, just an observation about Breonna Taylor. You had mentioned that there's some familial relationship with the Mattingleys. Breonna Taylor is sort of a BBW, I guess we would say, kind of a full-figured girl. And I noticed that the women of the Mattingly family seem to have similar body types.
Jason, again, your eye for detail, it is mind-blowing. And I'm not saying it because I'm a part of the Crowdsource The Truth family. I'm saying it because it's the truth. And your eye for authentic truth is so powerful. The Mattingly bloodline, which traces its roots out of Ireland, became slave owners, also in Savannah, Georgia, just like the Bryant bloodline and the Silsby bloodline that we talked about a week or two ago. Who own bloodlines of the Rankins, the Sheldons, okay, the Parkers, okay, the Taylors. So the Mattingly family, indirectly, whether they know it or not, are related to the bloodline of the late Breonna Taylor. In other words, Jason, does this deep state know this? Yes, they know this. And so this horrific event took place in March, right? But they just released it to the public on the nationwide level because Minneapolis is dying down, Wisconsin's dying down, so they need to keep unleashing tragedies. They're using Breonna Taylor as a pawn. But you're so right in that, Jason. I mean, the Mattingly bloodline had owned of the Taylor bloodline. Now, Jason, I'm not trying to disrespect the life of Breonna Taylor, okay, nor her mother, okay. So what I'm saying in my conclusion, Jason, that these men and women are pawns in a game that were its end result is to bring the total destruction of our Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, in the Bill of Rights, because the Palmer bloodline, the mother of Breonna Taylor, Tamika Palmer, received a $12 million check from the prompt controller of the city of Louisville, Kentucky. And now you got Benjamin Crump wanting some of that money. Let's prosecute them. Wait a minute. She had already signed the deal, Jason, back in September to receive a $12 million check. It's about money. Okay, look at George Floyd's family. They're cleaning up.
How much did they get?
Yes. But what's that, Jason?
But the city didn't pay them. That was people donating money, right? How much did Rodney King get paid? He got paid by Los Angeles.
Millions of dollars, millions of dollars. But it was the city of Louisville. The comptroller signs the checks in Louisville. So because
3.8 million is all Rodney King got, and she got 12.
Isn't that interesting? See, Jason, again, it's telling you and I there are certain pawns that have more value than the next pawn.
Huh.
It's still a pawn, but it's where that pawn is both valued and positioned in the game can their families receive a certain amount of money, because the pawn is a manumission redesigned slave. That's all they are. They are excellent link there, Jason. They are redesigned slaves. And then once they're done with the pawn, like they did with Rodney King, he didn't drown himself, Jason.
Oh.
Okay?
Yeah, they said he was smoking weed and he drowned in the pool. I'm thinking, who does that? No. He might fall asleep.
Who does that?
You'd wake right up.
Jason, he knows that the video was doctored.
King knows that.
Yes, he knew that. He knows that. And he was paid to keep his mouth shut. We have to create a narrative in order to perpetuate a message of racism. That's all, because the majority of Americans are not racist people, Jason. Is there racism? Yes. Is it systemic in some areas? But for the most part, most Americans are hardworking people who love God, whose name is Jesus Christ. They love the word of God, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and they're hardworking people. But you got a small group of devils, Jason. Look, Jason, I got to say this. Excuse my French, and I'm not cursing when I'm about to say it. What came to my mind was Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris had said concerning Breonna Taylor that there's got to be a Breonna Taylor Act, and I'm going to make sure that her family gets justice. This is the same black version of Hillary Clinton, who Christine Blasey Ford, they use Christine Blasey Ford. It doesn't matter what color the pawn is, but they use Christine Blasey Ford to not just destroy Brett Kavanaugh, but to injure the president. But it didn't work. But this witch, Kamala Harris, she said, I'm going to stay in contact with Christine Blasey Ford. Where's Christine Blasey Ford? They don't care, because Kamala Harris got where she was because Kamala Harris laid on her back and Kamala Harris sucked her way to the top. And it got her there, Jason, but she won't stay there. Okay, I'm not disrespecting women. It's Kamala Harris, whose her mother's bloodline, the Gopal bloodline, it was a part of the conspiracy that assassinated, okay, one of the greatest peacemakers in history, okay, Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. Her mother's bloodline, I'm not saying her mother had anything to do with it. Her mother was a child there. But the bloodline okay, of the Gulf War bloodline was responsible, along with the British Crown, of taking out Mahatma Gandhi. And her father is a radical Jamaican communist, okay?
Oh.
All a part of the Black Liberation Front, according to the autobiography of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was exposing Black liberation fronts all over the world because Malcolm X was a Black conservative. So Kamala Harris's father was deep into the Black Front, the Kingston Jamaican chapter, because the American chapter, remember, Jason, some months ago, the American chapter of the Black Liberation Front, they wanted to blow up the Statue of Liberty. Remember that?
Yeah,
And
some African woman climbed up it or something.
Yes, and they recruited, I believe, a white French woman out of Montreal to bring down the dynamite.
Wow.
And this happened 5 days before Malcolm X's assassination. So then, these are pawns. Oh, Jason, this is heavy. These are pawns in the game, being a part, Jason, of both the manipulation of Black pain and the weaponization of Black trauma. And I will say this too, and one day, Jason, I would love you and I to do a series on both the original Black Panther Party and the present day Black Panther Party. I'm going to say this that's going to blow away the minds of your listeners. Dr. Khalid Muhammad was a pawn in the game. He was a threat to Louis Farrakhan. He was the former national representative of the Nation of Islam, who made an anti-Semitic speech at King College in New Jersey. Anti-Semitism is evil at its core. And any person who spouts that poison, that person, listen, they should be put in prison, but at least they should not be allowed to speak anywhere, throughout America for the rest of their lives. It's evil. And it must be destroyed. I
think a lot of it comes from ignorance, Bishop. I think a lot of people hear that and they're raised with that, and maybe they've got some. It was a friend of mine who posted something. Her father was a well-known rap producer in the 80s who I guess had been, sort of screwed over in a bad deal with whatever Jewish record producer. And this girl had posted something where she was agreeing with David Duke over something he said about Jews. And I wrote to her, I was like, how can you possibly be ideologically aligned with the Ku Klux Klan? And she was like, oh, you saw that? And I was like, wait a minute, you just posted something where you're agreeing with the KKK and you're upset that I saw it? If you had said like, oh, I didn't realize or something, it was very weird. And it also reminds me of one other quick thing I wanted to share with you, because when you just mentioned Kamala Harris's father, I was trying to recall where the Jamaican Freemasonry, I don't know, was that Prince Hall? Is that the Jamaican stuff?
Yes. Jake, you got a great memory. Prince Hall was born in Barbados.
Right.
His father was a white slave owner, a British slave owner out of Barbados. His mother was an African slave, right? Then he was set free and sent to Boston, Massachusetts. He wanted to start his own secret society, so he had to get permission from the British Rothschild chapter in order to start the Prince Hall Masonic Order. Now, remember, Jason, some months ago, you had talked to a Jamaican guy on the street. I can't remember
fancy
that.
dressed up guy with a ring.
Yeah, and he didn't tell you everything about any Black secret society. Okay? And so then, when you look at Jamaican politics, when Jamaica was liberated from the British Crown, I believe in 1962, 63, then the Black Liberation Front, Black Liberation Theology, and including these Black organizations being funded by the KGB out of the Soviet Union, they took over Jamaica. Okay? They took over Jamaica, Jason. Okay? And Jamaica has been really destroyed to this day. So when we're talking about Jamaican politics, and that's Jason, you're hitting nerves. And another, probably, a new series we should start sometime in the future concerning Jamaican politics through the Jamaican Labour Party and the People's
We got to talk
National
about
Party.
Bob Marley, because I think he was assassinated.
Bob Marley was assassinated, okay, because they put something, I believe the agency was behind it, because his songs was exposing not just the global deep state and the CIA, but black corrupt political leaders, okay, throughout the history. One of the most corrupt political leaders, a man by the name of Edward Seaga. So all you Jamaicans know, Edward Seaga held on to power for decades, including his son. Edward Seaga had received millions of dollars from the KGB, and even after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, Edward Seaga was blood-sucking money from both the Jamaican people and from Russian oligarchs to continue Russian aggression through politics in Jamaica. Because the drug trade, Jason, and this is pawns in this global game, all of the dons, the mafia leaders, but they call them dons throughout the Caribbean islands, especially in Jamaica, because going back in the slave trade, most of the African slaves who could not be controlled were sent to the Caribbean, were sent to Jamaica. So most of the guns that come in and out of Jamaica comes from the CIA and MI6 and Mossad. So then the CIA, MI6, and Mossad, including Canadian intelligence, are running Jamaica into the ground. So you got mafia leaders called dons, men and women, who control what we call parishes, or it's like states here, but they're called, because listen, I went to Jamaica for 7 months back in 1999, okay? And I had spoken all over the island to all these churches, but many of the pastors, not all, but many of the pastors are connected to the drug trade in and through Jamaica.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
But you mean like marijuana or something? Because I know Rastafarianism, it's part of the religion, so perhaps that's not, they're doing marijuana or something more serious.
It's more serious, not just marijuana and hashish, but crack cocaine, okay? When you look at the crack trade during the 1980s and 90s, and was a Gary Webb who had exposed it and supposedly killed himself. He's left-handed, but he shoots himself in the back of the head. Another topic for another day. But the politicians in the history of Jamaica, Jason, have been so corrupt, okay, have been so connected to the purse strings of American power on the left. So now you have a corrupt police force in Jamaica who are killing people left and right, Jason. So you got heads of state, you got there's a listing of the ministers of state in Jamaican history, all connected to CIA drug money. So if you try to tell black people that, they call me and Uncle Tom. So you got the House of Speakers, the list of the speakers of the House in Jamaican history. Every single president, Jason, oh my God, this is really going to be exposing a lot of people. When you look at the listing of the presidents of Jamaican history from Clifford Clarence Campbell in 1962, okay, to Winston V. Jones, okay, to Oswald Harding, even today, Jason, with Prime Minister Tom Tavares Vinson, they're all in the pockets of drug cartels connected with the CIA, French intelligence, okay, including MI6. The Chinese are controlling Jamaica as well. And do you know the Chinese are not just controlling Jamaica, they're controlling the entire continent of Africa, because they're paying off these demonic regime leaders in Africa in the tens of billions of dollars, whereas the Chinese are coming in and building infrastructure, okay? But yet, Africa is now a new Chinese colonial satellite, just like Jamaica.
Well, they want the minerals from Africa to make batteries and electronic stuff.
Yes, they want the minerals from Africa to make batteries, and they also want the gold and the silver. You talked about Cecil Rhodes, and he had what, 100-year plan?
200-year plan.
A 200-year plan, and so Cecil Rhodes being a part of the global Luciferian Baphomet system. But Jason, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to let you go. This is going to be mind blowing. Every single prime minister or president in Jamaican history are related by blood. Now, they may or may not even know this, and you're going to get a lot of Jamaicans, oh, the bishop's not telling the truth. Just like every prime minister in South African's history, okay, from the time of the birth of apartheid to the fall of apartheid in 1991, all of the South African prime ministers were related by blood, Jason, okay? Up until Prime Minister de Klerk. Jamaica's prime ministers, going back to 1962, when they were set free from the British Crown, from Clifford Clarence Gamble to President Tom Tavares Finson, are all related by blood and chosen by the Illuminati system. But the people of Jamaica, they don't know that. Oh, Jason, this is, and see, so now you and I, we're going into some powerful areas concerning Black enslavement, which continues. They're doing it to themselves.
Right.
Because Jamaica, all of Africa, they're being broken politically by China, by England, by the Mossad, and by French intelligence. So Edward Seaga, listen, his bloodline is connected to the bloodlines of these prime ministers. They're all interrelated by blood, and they're put into power, not to benefit their own people in Jamaica, Jason. They're put in power to keep the power structure intact that has enslaved us for 430 years from the left. So Jamaica is a communist caliphate nation.
Wow. Politifeast is telling us that Jamaica was actually never set free from the crown. And it brings me to the final idea I wanted to share with you, Bishop, because you're speaking about, new enslavement. I think that people are enslaved by ignorance, and frequently people get insulted if you make a comment that somebody is ignorant about something. It does not mean that they're stupid. It just means they don't know. And the thing that this Prince Hall graphic brought to my attention, because I was looking at Instagram last week, and a friend of mine this girl was in kindergarten with me, and I can't say that I talk to her very much, but she's on the social media stuff, and we went to grade school together and all that, and I've known her all my life. And she posted all this Masonic stuff. And I asked her, are you in the Boule? And she said, no, I'm part of the Order of the Eastern Star.
Jason, I'm so glad.
But I don't think she knows, Bishop, because this girl is just so kind. Right. So I was going to say, she's ignorant of this, and she thinks it's just a good way to hang out with her friends and be in a club and all that. But look at this symbol. I know you've shown it to us before. It's basically the Baphomet head.
Oh, my God. And Jason, it's the head of Baphomet. Okay, when we're talking about the Divine Nine, that young lady, Jason, she's kind. These people are at a lower level. So when they say I'm an Eastern Star, I'm an Alpha Phi Alpha, I'm an Alpha Kappa Alpha, I'm a Kappa Alpha Psi. When they say I am an Omega Psi 5, a Delta Sigma Theta, a Zeta Phi Beta, a Sigma Gamma Rho, and a Iota Phi Theta, they're Boule. But it's so layered, Jason, they don't rip the people at the bottom who may be nice African Americans, just like this young lady, okay? But they don't know that they are the tentacles of the Divine Nine that began on the 15th of May in 1904 in the hometown of Kobe Bryant, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's also the hometown of the AME Church that was built by two Boulets, Frederick Douglass, okay, and Richard Allen, which Philadelphia is also the hometown, okay, of the Prince Masonic Hall Global System. So these are Black Greek letter secret societies of fraternities and sororities. This is where we get the term sorrows or sororities. They are the tentacles of Sigma Pi Phi that oversees not just these 9 Black Greek letter secret societies, my friend, but they oversee the Eastern Stars and the Daughters of Jove. These Black women, men and women, they don't know.
Yeah.
So why did, and I got to say this before we go, Jason. Oh, this is such a powerful interview today. There has never been, and I want Black people to hear me, there has never been a Black organization in American history that has been organically created by Black people. Organizations were created for us, but not created by us. Let me say that again. These organizations, even the Nation of Islam, started by a white man, okay, whom they say is their God, a white man out of New Zealand. And I'm not disrespecting Minister Farrakhan. I'm just revealing truth, okay? Wallace D. Ford is of New Zealand blood whose parents were British out of the British colonized area that you and I call Central India today, or India today. So the parents of Wallace D. Ford, a white man who immigrated to the United States, had created the Nation of Islam. Not one Black organization was organically created by us. It was created and built for us, but not created and built by us, which means Black America is still a slave, Jason. Because, my friend, do you know half, I'm talking about pawns in the game, the weaponization of Black trauma? Do you know, my friend, that half of Nike's global sales comes from the financial psyop of the Black diaspora? Half of their global sales from 2019 come from Black money. Why? Because the Black diaspora, not all of us, but a certain percentage of us, our low self-esteem is being manipulated and exploited. So when you have a people who they think that their identity is in a pair of Michael Jordan sneakers, and Michael Jordan doesn't give, and you know what, concerning the Black community. LeBron James talks about, Breonna Taylor. But if Breonna Taylor was alive, do you think LeBron James would be talking about? No. So then half of Nike sales comes from the low self-esteem of a people who don't love who they are. They can't read the stock of Nike on the New York Stock Exchange, but they'll buy a $500 pair of sneakers. They cannot read the NASDAQ report or the Russell Index concerning how much stock that Nike is worth. But they know they would tell you who is the starting 5 for the Los Angeles Lakers, because these are manumission slaves that's been redesigned. Because when you look at the athletic shoe industrial complex, the soul The bottom of the shoe is shaped like an ancient slave ship. You showed that some weeks ago. We brought that up. So the sole of the slave ship is now the schematical design and shape of the present day U.S. athletic shoe industrial complex, where you have multi-million-dollar slaves that if they think about leaving the plantation via Kobe Bryant or Chadwick Boseman, they will simply take you out in a helicopter crash or poison you so you can get colon cancer 4 years later. Oh, Jason, this is the reason why I'm hard on Black Americans. And that young lady that you talked to, Jason, a nice young lady, but she doesn't know. Even Black colleges and universities were not organically created by Black people. It was started and created by Julius Rosenwald, who created the Sears Roebuck Company. It was this Rosenwald devil, not because he's Jewish. No, this man was a devil, Jason, because he gave a $50,000 check to Tuskegee University to create the syphilis conspiracy. Rosenwald did that. This is the same man who not only gave a $50,000 check to Booker T. Washington, who later was taken out by the Boule because he did not know that the money he received from Julius Rosenwald was going towards the creation of the conspiracy of the Tuskegee syphilis conspiracy, with 600 Black men and women for a protracted period of 40 years, from 1932 to 1972, were injected with syphilis to see how the body of the anatomy of a Black person would respond. So all of the Black colleges and universities was built by the establishment through Rosenwald, not to benefit Black America so that they can be liberated. Historically, Black colleges and universities, my friend, were created and designed by the deep state Baphomet global Luciferian system to keep the system of enslavement intact by creating a Black bourgeoisie element of this country, which we call the Black nobility. And the Black bourgeoisie element of this nation, they have nothing to do, Jason, with the masses of the suffering of Black Americans. But they're there to stoke the flames of hatred toward white people. And then when all of this dies down, just like it did in Minneapolis and Wisconsin, when it dies down in vitamin B deficient Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, Louis Bean Pie Farrakhan, they will leave Louisville and go back to their multi-million-dollar home because they don't care about us, Jason, but they're being used by the global Luciferian communist left called the Democratic Party. My friend, this was, I got to confess, Jason, this was one of the most powerful interviews I've ever been a part of, for the past year, as being a member of your team on the Crowdsource the Truth family.
I'm honored.
Powerful lecture today. I'm honored. Yes.
Well, thank you, Bishop. I'm honored to have you here. And you mentioned something that struck with me, that these organizations for Black people are not created for, you said, for us, by us, reminded me of Damon John and his company, which is called For Us, By Us. Well, FUBU. So then, yes. I wonder if he knows about all this stuff that you're talking about. He strikes me as a very intelligent guy. I've only ever seen him on Shark Tank, but he's good. I like him.
Yeah, and I'm looking at that picture, and what's his name? Damon John? John Damon? Yeah. Damon John? Okay, yeah. And I believe that FUBU was sold.
Maybe. He started it. He was a waiter at Red Lobster, and he started this in his mother's house, just printing shirts, and then it became a huge fashion company.
See, and again, that's a powerful example. Now, What happened? He sold his company, okay, into the hundreds of millions of dollars. He sold it to Puma,
Oh, yeah.
the athletic and right, one of the
But I
most
mean,
powerful
how could
American
somebody do that, Bishop? I think this guy is younger than me. So how could somebody do that if the United States was totally racist? I mean, this is a guy who literally was a waiter
Exactly.
who became a multimillionaire. That's supposed to be the American dream, that if you're smart and tenacious and you have the right idea, you can do it.
You see, Jason, and that's the perfect example. He pulled himself up by his bootstraps. But see what he did, he sold the company to Puma. Just like Bob Johnson sold BET, okay, to Viacom for pennies on the dollar. Which now you're a rich slave, but you're a rich slave. Just like the Juneteenth holiday that black people celebrate Juneteenth, because on the 19th of June in 1865 in Galveston, Texas, Major General Gordon Granger, who later would be convicted for pedophilia, the raping of young former black slave children, gave the address on the steps of the county courthouse in Galveston. He said, and I quote, this is pawns in the game, right? The manipulation and the weaponization of black trauma. Major Gordon Granger said, now you are forever former slaves. Now you are a free slave. Now get that. You're not a liberated black man or woman or child.
Right.
You are a free slave.
That's Orwellian.
Yeah, it's an Orwellian. It's an Orwellian psyop, which means through the Gestalt Theory, we're going to allow you to accumulate millions of dollars worth of content, but you will only allowed to go so far to the top, which means you will never own the crab barrel that's keeping the black diaspora at the bottom. Now you got the foremans around the crab barrel, Reverend Al, vitamin B deficient Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, Oprah Witch Winfrey, her girlfriend Gail Stale King. They are the boule foremans around the trend, the top, the border of the crab barrel, and they are directed by their crab masters who own the barrel. Rothschild, Oppenheimer, Rockefeller, Pritzker, Soros, Gates. We want you to go to the bottom of the barrel, to Puma, to Nike, to Converse, to Asics. Get that athlete. Don't allow him to think now, as the great Jordan Maxwell once said, don't allow the slave to think. Because if the slave begins to think, he is no more a slave, but he is an independent thinking entity. So LeBron James is told to bounce a basketball. Tom Brady is told to throw a football. Okay? All of these players who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, some of them billions of dollars, excellent link there with that boule tattoo on his chest. Who is LeBron James? LeBron James calls himself King James. To all black Americans, stop calling this man King James. There's only one king, and his name is the Lord Jesus Christ, who is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. LeBron James knew that Kobe Bryant would be taken out the day before. LeBron James is on the side of the Chinese regime out of Beijing. Why? Because he's a pawn, Jason. LeBron James is a Chinese asset. I'm not talking about the 1.4 billion Chinese citizens who hate President Xi Jinping in the Chinese government in Beijing. I'm talking about that evil regime, a part of the Ministry of State Security, which is Chinese intelligence. So LeBron James is in the pocket of the Chinese deep state. That's why he took up, not for the Hong Kong protesters, like Kobe did. And that sealed Kobe's fate. China runs the National Basketball Association. And they also run Black Lives Matter. Because Alicia Garza is planning to take a trip to Hawaii, if she's not there already, to speak to the governor of Hawaii and to speak to the deep state there in Hawaii to keep the nation on lockdown. Who in the hell is Alicia Garza?
Yeah, why is she doing all that?
Because Alicia Garza, Opa Tometi, and Patrice Cullors, they are political whores, Jason. These three lesbian stinking witches. They're not witches because they're black women. And they're not witches because they're women. They're witches because they're operating under a spirit that's not from God, based on the Odu Ifa, West African witchcraft religion. Now the woman in the front wearing the white t-shirt, she's going to speak to the governor of Hawaii. Do you know, Jason, they got death pods in Hawaii?
They have what?
People want, yes. If they want to commit suicide, they can just get in this pod. Jason, we're not being told the truth concerning what's going on the island of Hawaii. But these women are pawns in a game where they are being manipulated and they are being weaponized for the benefit of the system and not their own people. Jason, this was a powerful interview today. Thank you so much, my friend.
I appreciate it, Bishop. We've gone way over time, but it's been super fascinating. So I hope everybody has enjoyed what we've been talking about. It's a big week for the Bishop. He's got a new syndicated radio show that people, what are the details, Bishop? When will people be able to hear you on WOR 710?
Yes, 5:30. Now we have to do it remotely because the iHeart studios are shut down for the rest of the year because of COVID-19.
Oh my.
So we have to do it remotely for the rest of the year because they're not allowing any, according to what my boss told me that at WOR, we're not allowed to go to the actual studio, so we had to do it remotely. So beginning this Sunday at 5:30 p.m., okay, Global Spiritual Revolution is going to now, that has the ability now to reach 200 nations around the world. Jason, this is big time now.
Yeah.
This is big time. So, but you know what, Jason? It was you who introduced me to the world. So I thank God for you, Jason. It's you first and then, then Alex Jones. So I thank God for you, Jason, because you laid the foundation. Last year when you and I had talked about, when I came into your studio, concerning the Boule Secret Society, right? The Down Low Club, right?
Right.
Of Chicago. And now I'm telling you, that has just taken off. So this Sunday at 5:30, and we should have a link up by Friday. So then by next Tuesday, you can show that to your listeners. And this is volume 1 of Pawns in the Game, the weaponization of Black trauma. And I thank you, my friend, because it was mind-blowing teaching for your listeners all over the world today. Thank you so much, my friend.
My pleasure, Bishop. It was an excellent show. And I also just want to remind people that each week they can see our broadcasts either on Crowdsource The Truth, or of course they can go and subscribe to the Global Spiritual Revolution Radio and Media Group YouTube channel. Bishop, we've got over 1,200 people watching us right now. So I want to encourage our viewers to help us keep this kind of independent reporting alive. Bishop, there's been a lot of efforts to try to stifle conservatives and independent voices on various social media platforms, not just YouTube. So it is important that people who appreciate this information, the over 1,000 watching right now, and the many thousands who will see this broadcast over the next few days, I want to encourage people to go to paypal.me/Bishop patreon.com/GSRR Media Group and help financially support the Bishop's global spiritual revolution and keep these shows coming. I also hope that people will go to crowdsourcethetruth.com and sponsor the Counter Lawfare Fund or become subscribers on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I'm going to be starting a new series where I'm going to go into all the details of Robert David Steele's anti-speech strategy. And we're going to talk a lot about Steele v. Goodman, the legal case that was just dismissed earlier this week. And I think I'm going to start that series. I hope I have some time to do it tonight before the debate, because I know everybody wants to check that out.
Yes,
Tonight's episode of More Pain is going to be postponed for the debate, so people can watch that. But I will be back later, and thanks everybody for watching. Bishop, I'll see you next week.
I see you next week, my friend, for Volume 2 of Pawns in the Game, The Weaponization of Black Trauma. See you then, my friend. God bless.
Thanks for watching, everybody.